I went camping with my younger sister in Mt. Hood National Forest in Oregon one summer when we both had time off. I was 25, she had just turned 19. We'd done a few weekend hikes before, but this was our first time doing an overnight in such a remote spot. We picked a site way off a logging road, not an official campground, just a primitive clearing I'd found on a forum. No bathrooms, no fire rings. You had to drive about a mile off the main road, through a bumpy gravel path with overgrown brush and tall trees on both sides. We passed no other vehicles, no tire tracks, no people. Felt perfect. The spot we chose was a little clearing surrounded by tall pines and fir trees. The ground was soft with pine needles, and we were far enough from the road that it was completely quiet except for birds and wind. We set up our tent in the flattest area, not too close to the tree line, but not totally exposed either. There was a small slope to the west that led down to a dry creek bed. It looked like water used to run there in the spring, but now it was just rocks and leaves. We collected some dead wood, built a fire pit with stones, and got a small fire going. We cooked ramen and hot dogs, watched the sky turn dark, and talked for hours. I remember looking up and seeing a mess of stars. No light pollution, no planes, just black sky and cold air and trees. The first night was peaceful. Cold, but peaceful. We both wore hoodies and thermals, crawled into our sleeping bags, and passed out pretty quickly. I woke up once around 3 a.m. to pee, and when I stepped outside the tent, it was dead quiet. So quiet I could hear my heartbeat. No owls, no wind, just nothing. It was unnerving, but I shook it off and went back to sleep. The second day we explored around. We followed the creek bed for a while, climbed a few fallen logs, found an old rusted canteen half buried in the dirt. My sister joked it was from a missing hiker, but I could tell she was a little creeped out too. We didn't go too far, maybe a mile out and back. No signs of anyone else, no tracks. The forest felt thick and endless in every direction. You get that feeling sometimes when you're deep in the woods, like you're being watched, even though you know there's probably no one for miles. That night, we had a small fire again. It got colder than the first night. We ate canned beans and tortillas, shared a flask of whiskey to warm up, and listened to music on my little Bluetooth speaker until it died. Around 11, we climbed into the tent. We were both tired and sore from walking. I remember zipping the tent door closed and setting my flashlight right beside me just like the night before. Everything was normal. I don't know exactly what time it was when I woke up. My watch was in my shoe by the flap, and I didn't want to dig around. But I'd guess it was around 2 in the morning. What woke me wasn't a loud noise. It was a feeling, like I was suddenly fully alert. No dream, no transition, just awake. I could feel my sister's breathing beside me, slow and even. Then I heard it, a voice. At first I couldn't tell what it was. It sounded far away but clear enough that I knew it wasn't an animal. It was soft, a woman's voice. It wasn't screaming, it wasn't talking, it was crying. I froze. The sound was uneven and dragged out, like someone trying to breathe while sobbing. But there was something wrong with it. It didn't sound scared. It didn't sound real. It was like someone trying to sound like they were crying, like they'd practiced it. I didn't say a word. I just stayed still and listened. After maybe 10 or 15 seconds, my sister shifted beside me. I could tell she was awake now too. She didn't say anything either. We just listened. The crying went on. A few long sobs, then silence. Then again. The rhythm was off, too deliberate. It echoed through the trees in a weird way. Not like someone in real pain, just off. Felt like it was maybe 100 yards away, maybe less. I reached slowly for the zipper on the tent flap and opened it just a crack. The cold air hit my face instantly. I looked out. Nothing. No lights. No movement. Just tall, black trees and shadows. The crying stopped, and then came the sound of twigs snapping. Closer. One snap, then another, then silence. It wasn't fast like someone running. It was careful, deliberate. A step, then wait. Another step, then quiet again. I didn't move. My sister didn't move either. I could feel her hand now on my forearm. She was gripping it tightly. I sat there frozen, staring into the trees. I didn't turn on the flashlight. I didn't make a sound. My heart was pounding in my ears so loud I couldn't tell if the footsteps were still going. But after a few minutes, everything went quiet again. No more crying, no more steps, just silence. We stayed like that, unmoving, for what felt like a long time. I don't know how long exactly. Eventually, I closed the flap slowly and laid back down. Neither of us said a word. I didn't sleep after that. I just stared at the roof of the tent, waiting for something else to happen. But it didn't. When the sky started to get light, maybe around 5:30, I finally unzipped the tent and stepped out. It was freezing and everything was covered in dew. My sister got out too, wrapped in a blanket. We didn't speak until I started walking the perimeter of the campsite. That's when I saw them. Footprints, not ours. They were boot prints, large, maybe size 11 or 12. Deep tread, like hiking boots or work boots. They came from the forest on the west side, where the slope dipped down. They circled our tent once, maybe twice. The prints were spaced evenly, slow and deliberate. Then they led back into the forest. That was all I needed to see. We packed up everything in 15 minutes. Didn't even eat breakfast. We just shoved things into bags, tore down the tent without folding it properly, and tossed everything into the back of the car. My sister kept looking over her shoulder. I kept my knife in my hand the whole time. We didn't talk until we were back on the main road. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't some creature. It was a person. Someone out there walking through the woods in the middle of the night, crying like a woman, pretending to cry, and sneaking up on our tent. Whoever it was didn't want help. They weren't in trouble. They were trying to draw us out, and they almost did. That's what stayed with me the most. The way it was calculated. The way it was all just a little too controlled. They knew what they were doing. We never went back to that part of the forest. I deleted the GPS pin for the spot. My sister doesn't even want to talk about the trip anymore. Since then, I've been more careful about where we camp. And if we ever hear something strange in the woods again, we stay put. We don't look. We don't respond. Whatever that was out there, it wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. It was someone who knew how to make people curious, knew how to mimic vulnerability. They wanted us to come out, and we almost did. A few years back, my friend Eric and I planned a weekend hiking trip deep into the Ozark Mountains. It was the kind of trip we had talked about for years, just two guys, off the grid, no cell service, no people, just wilderness. We wanted something remote, something that made you feel small. We studied the maps, packed light but smart, and drove out early on a Friday morning. The drive itself was long and winding, mostly gravel roads by the end. The trailhead was nothing more than a small break in the trees with an old wooden post and faded paint. We locked up the truck, slung on our packs, and hiked in. It took us the better part of the day to reach a bend in the river we'd seen on the satellite maps. It looked perfect. Flat ground for a tent, fresh water, a few natural rock formations nearby, and thick trees all around us. It felt like we were 100 miles from anyone. By sunset, we had the tent pitched, a fire going, and dinner cooking. It was that early November chill, cold enough to see your breath at night, but still comfortable with a warm jacket. We sat by the fire, roasted some sausages we'd packed, and cracked open a couple of beers we'd carried in. It was quiet except for the river flowing beside us and the occasional crack of a twig from a squirrel or maybe a deer in the distance. By around 9 p.m., the fire had settled into a bed of coals, and we were just sitting in that relaxed kind of silence. I remember leaning back on my elbows, looking up through the trees at the stars. It was the kind of dark you only get that deep in the woods. No towns, no roads, just pure blackness between the trees. Around midnight, we both saw it at the same time. Across the river, maybe 70 or 80 yards away, a fire. A new one. Low, controlled like ours, but it hadn't been there earlier. We would have seen the smoke, or at least noticed someone passing by on the opposite bank. That area was steep and rocky, hard to get to unless you knew where you were going. But there it was, burning steady between the trees. There wasn't a sound, no footsteps, no talking, no movement at all. Just that small fire flickering between the branches. We both stared at it for a while. At first, I thought maybe another group of hikers had come through late, but it didn't sit right. The trail didn't pass on that side. You'd have to bushwhack for hours to get there, and even then, you wouldn't set up at midnight in the cold like that. We didn't say anything, didn't call out, just sat and watched. After maybe 15-20 minutes, I started feeling uncomfortable. Not scared exactly, but like we were being watched. That kind of gut feeling you get when something's off. Eric kept glancing over at it, too. We both thought the same thing, but neither of us said it. An hour passed. Still no movement. Just the fire. Then we saw the light. It was sharp, green, one of those laser pointers, the kind you can see all the way across a field. It came from the woods behind the fire across the river. First it swept the trees just above the flame line, like someone scanning. Then it dipped low and aimed directly at us. It blinked twice, steady and slow. Then again. Then it locked on our tent. It stayed there for a few seconds. Then it was gone. We didn't wait. We didn't discuss anything. We just acted. I grabbed the water bottle and dumped it on the fire. Eric started tearing down the tent. We didn't even bother rolling anything up properly. We stuffed the gear into our packs, still warm from sleeping bags and cooking. It took maybe 5 minutes, tops. My hands were shaking the whole time. The woods were dead silent around us. That silence that presses in on you. I kept looking back toward the other side of the river, but I couldn't see anything past the trees. We didn't turn on our headlamps until we were 50 yards up the trail, heading back the way we came. Even then, we kept them on the lowest brightness setting. The trail was rough, full of roots and loose stones. It had taken us most of a day to hike in, but we made it out in a few hours that night. We didn't say a single word to each other the entire time. Just the sound of our boots on the path, breathing heavy, and the occasional snap of a branch somewhere off in the woods. It wasn't until the sky started lightening, maybe 5 in the morning, that we finally saw the truck through the trees. We were soaked with sweat and our legs felt like rubber. I unlocked the doors, we tossed our gear in the back, and just sat inside with the doors locked for a few minutes. The sun hadn't fully come up yet, but we could start to see the forest around us more clearly. I turned the key but didn't start the engine right away. Something made me look back. Standing at the edge of the treeline, just a few feet from where the path disappeared into the woods, was a man. He wasn't moving, just standing there, still as a statue. I couldn't make out his face, he was too far and it was still dim. But I could tell he was tall, lean, maybe wearing a jacket or hoodie. His arms hung at his sides. He didn't raise them, didn't wave, just watched. Eric saw him too. We didn't say anything. I started the engine and drove. We didn't stop until we hit pavement. Later, when I looked at the maps again, I realized something. There were no trails or access points on the other side of that river. None. It was all private land, miles of it.
No cabins.
No campsites, just woods and hills and old logging clearings. We still don't know who that was, or why there was a fire across from us in the middle of the night, or why someone pointed a laser at our tent. I haven't been back since. I still go hiking, but never that deep. Never without cell service. And I always keep an eye on the treeline. Back in 2015, I was doing wildlife research for a college project in the Adirondacks. I was a biology major, and this was part of an independent study I'd gotten permission for. My focus was animal movement and behavior in less trafficked areas of the forest. I had permission from a state biologist and a few local property owners to set up wildlife trail cams and log sightings, tracks, and droppings. My gear included a backpack with camera traps, notepads, batteries, a GPS, and food for the day. I usually hiked out early in the morning and returned before dusk. Most of the time it was boring, just lots of walking and waiting, but it gave me a kind of peace I liked. I'd done about 2 weeks of solo trips at that point and had gotten used to the routine. That day started like any other. I parked my car on a turnout near an old service road, double-checked my route, and started the hike. The path I was taking wasn't maintained anymore. It was more of a memory of a trail than a real one. I followed the tree markers and my GPS to stay on track. My plan was to reach a clearing about 5 miles in and set up 2 trail cams before heading back. I'd brought extra supplies in case I wanted to detour and check out a few stream beds for signs of beaver or coyote activity. About 3.5 miles in, I passed a tree with a red painted X on it. I paused there for a second because I hadn't seen any trees marked like that before. The paint was old, faded and cracked, but still visible. I checked my map again to make sure I wasn't accidentally entering private land. Everything looked fine. I was still within the public use zone. I kept going. Roughly another mile in, I veered slightly off the old path. The forest was dense but quiet. No wind, no birdsong, just the sound of leaves crunching under my boots and the occasional twig snapping. I started noticing strange things on the ground. Metal wires, not just scattered, but coiled and tangled, half sunk into the earth. A few steps later, I spotted the first cage. It was rusted and dented, probably about 5 feet long and 3 feet tall. The kind of cage you might use to transport a big dog. At first, I figured it was dumped junk, old equipment someone forgot or left behind. But then I saw another one, and another. Some were partially buried in leaf litter. Others had tree roots growing through them. They were all weathered like they'd been there a long time, maybe years. A few were covered with what used to be tarps, now just shredded plastic hanging in strips. What really made my stomach turn was that one of the cages still had blankets inside. Moldy, half-rotted, torn up. They weren't arranged like bedding either. They were bunched into the corners, like someone or something had been curled up in them. And one cage had what looked like a cracked ceramic bowl, the kind you'd leave out for a pet. I leaned closer to check, and that's when I saw the restraints. They were bolted directly into the sidebars of the cage. Heavy-duty metal loops with remnants of leather straps still hanging off them. Not something you'd use for an animal. Not casually, at least. This wasn't hunting gear. This wasn't trapping equipment. This was something else entirely. I stood there for a while trying to make sense of it. My heart was racing, but my brain was still in that weird, logical gear you go into when something doesn't fit. I took out my phone and snapped some pictures, wide shots, close-ups, everything I could without getting too close. The air felt heavier, and I noticed the sounds of the woods had gone completely quiet. I hadn't realized how still everything was until that moment. No birds.
No squirrels.
Nothing. Something about the silence made me uneasy, so I decided I'd seen enough and needed to get out. I turned around to retrace my steps. That's when I felt it, this prickling at the back of my neck, like someone was watching. I tried to ignore it and kept walking fast, trying not to look behind me, but I couldn't help it. Every few steps, I'd stop and listen, and I started hearing things. Footsteps, not regular like an animal, not the scurry of a deer or rustle of a raccoon. These were deliberate, one after the other. Crunch, pause, crunch, like someone trying to match my pace or stop when I stopped. But I couldn't see anything. Nothing moved behind the trees. I told myself it was paranoia, maybe a deer spooked by my scent, maybe echo from my own boots, but the feeling wouldn't leave. I could feel eyes on me. Cold sweat ran down my back even though the air was cool. I kept walking. I wanted to break into a run, but I knew better. If I tripped or turned my ankle out there, I'd be completely screwed. So I walked fast but steady. Every time I passed a familiar landmark, a fallen log, a mossy boulder, I felt a tiny bit of relief. When I passed the tree with the red X again, I knew I was getting closer to safety, but that also made me feel worse. Why mark that tree at all? And what was on the other side of that line? By the time I reached the service road, my legs were burning and my pack felt twice as heavy. I was breathing hard, but I kept pushing. I was maybe 300 feet from my car when I stopped hearing the footsteps. Just silence again. My car was parked in the dirt lot just past a row of trees. I almost ran the last few steps, but when I reached my car, I froze. Something was wrong. The back driver's side door had 4 deep scratches on it. Not surface scratches like you'd get from keys or branches. These were gouged into the metal, deep enough to see the silver beneath the paint. 4 of them almost evenly spaced, like someone had taken a metal rake or claws to it. I stood there staring for a long time. I looked around the lot. No other vehicles. No sign of people. I popped the trunk, shoved my gear inside, and got in the car. I locked the doors immediately. I didn't start the engine right away. I sat there shaking, trying to calm down, listening, but there was nothing. Eventually, I drove away. I didn't stop until I hit the highway an hour later. That night, I transferred the pictures from my phone and emailed them to a friend of mine who worked in law enforcement. I didn't say much, just asked if he'd ever seen anything like it and told him where I'd been. A few hours later, I got a one-line reply. "Do not go back there." That was it.
No explanation.
No follow-up. I didn't go back. I ended the project early and wrote a paper using the data I already had. I avoided that whole section of the forest for the rest of the semester. For a long time, I didn't tell anyone else what happened. I wasn't sure how to explain it without sounding like I was exaggerating or imagining things. But I wasn't. I know what I saw. I know how it felt. I still have the photos saved in an old folder. I don't open them often, but I haven't deleted them either. Sometimes I think about those cages, how long they've been there, who put them there, and what they were really used for. I think about how far off the main trails they were, how deliberate the placement was, how quiet everything went as soon as I found them. I don't know if someone was still watching over that place, or if I was just unlucky enough to stumble onto something I wasn't supposed to see. But I do know this, whatever it wasn't meant to be found. And I never want to find anything like that again. I went backpacking alone in Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina, early October. The weather was cool and dry, perfect for hiking. I'd planned a 3-day loop, leave from the southern trailhead, go deep into the woods, loop back around, and come out where I started. I had done solo hikes before, even a few longer ones, but this trail was more remote than I was used to. That's why I liked it. I wanted to unplug, get away from the noise, the screens, the people. Just me, the trail, and the trees. The first day went smooth. I started early in the morning, and by sunset I'd covered more than 10 miles. The leaves had started turning, mostly gold and a few deep reds. The forest was quiet, only birds and the wind in the trees. I didn't see another person all day. That night, I made camp near a small stream, cooked a dehydrated meal, set up my tent, and read for a while before falling asleep. The second day started the same way. Cool morning, frost on the leaves, some mist rising through the trees. I felt good. No blisters, nothing sore, just that peaceful tiredness that comes from moving all day. By afternoon, I was far out. No cell signal, no sign of any other hikers. The path narrowed in places, sometimes just a faded dirt line through thick brush. It was around then, probably close to 3 p.m., that I saw him. Bright orange jacket. That's the first thing I noticed. At first, I thought it was a hunter, which made me nervous. But then I saw he wasn't carrying a gun. Just standing there, off-trail, maybe 10 or 15 feet away, holding a paper map in both hands like he couldn't make sense of it. He looked up when I got closer and stepped onto the trail like he was relieved. I slowed down. Something about him made me uneasy, but he didn't look threatening, just lost. Mid-30s, dark hair, unshaven, thin. His jacket was too clean for someone who'd been out here a long time, but his face looked rough, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red, and his lips were cracked. I stopped a few feet away. He asked me something. I don't remember the exact words, but he wanted to know if I'd come from the North Trailhead. I told him no, I'd come from the South. He stared at me for a second like I'd said something that didn't make sense. Then he held out the map. I took one look and realized it was for a completely different park. A state park in Tennessee. Not even close. I asked how long he'd been out here. He said 3 days. I don't know why, but I didn't believe him. Something about the way he said it. Too quick, too rehearsed. His water bottle was empty, so I gave him some of mine. He didn't thank me, just took it and drank like he hadn't had any in a while. I asked if he wanted to hike out with me, told him I was heading back to the trailhead by tomorrow morning. There was a ranger station there. He just nodded. We started walking together. He didn't talk much after that. I tried to ask where he'd come from, what trail he'd been on, but he just gave short answers or ignored me completely. A few times I caught him glancing over at me, not like he was curious, but like he was measuring something. His eyes lingered too long. He never walked ahead of me, always stayed just behind. After about an hour of this, I kept one hand near the knife clipped to my belt, just in case. As the sun started to dip, I picked a spot to camp. Not a perfect one, but good enough flat ground, not too exposed. He didn't say anything when I started setting up, just stood nearby like he was waiting for instructions. I offered him some food, which he took, but again didn't thank me. I noticed he didn't have much gear on him. No pack, just that jacket and a small nylon bag that looked more like a gym bag than something you'd take into the backcountry. That night was cold. I had my sleeping bag and was warm enough, but I didn't really sleep. Every time I shifted, I could hear him shifting too, rustling the leaves, breathing louder than he needed to. I finally sat up around 2 in the morning and looked over. He was sitting cross-legged outside his own makeshift camp, just a ground cloth and some gear scattered around, watching me. I asked if everything was okay. He said yeah, just didn't like to sleep. His voice was calm but flat, like he was talking from somewhere else. I didn't say anything back, just laid down again, but I kept the knife right next to my sleeping bag. I closed my eyes, but I never really went under. I kept imagining I'd open my eyes and see him standing over me. My heart was pounding even though nothing had happened. I was thinking about what I'd do if he tried something, where I'd go, how fast I could grab my gear, whether I'd even have time to react. But he didn't move, or at least not while I was looking. As soon as the sky started turning gray, I packed up. Fast. Didn't even cook anything. He watched me the whole time. I told him I was heading out and that we were only a few hours from the ranger station. He didn't respond, just stood there while I shouldered my pack. I walked away without saying anything else. Didn't look back. For the first half hour, I kept listening for footsteps, expecting to hear him behind me, but I never did. When I finally looked back down the trail, there was nothing, just trees. I reached the ranger station around 10 a.m. It was empty when I got there, just a locked office and some old trail maps in a weatherproof box. But about 15 minutes later, a ranger drove up. I told him everything. About the man in the woods, how he was lost, had no gear, wrong map, how he'd followed me for a while then stayed behind. The ranger took it seriously, asked for the location where I saw him, what he looked like, what time it was. He called it in. Within an hour, there were 2 more guys there asking more questions. They said they were going to hike in and look for him. I waited around for a while, gave a full description, even marked the spot on a map where we camped. Then I left. A couple days later, I called the ranger station to follow up. They said they didn't find anyone. No signs of a camp.
No trash, no footprints, no orange jacket.
Nothing. They asked again if I was sure about the location. I even went back and checked my GPS tracker. It lined up. They said sometimes people get turned around and find their own way out. But the guy didn't even have a map for the right park. No phone, no water, no bag. I don't think he found his way out. I don't even think he wanted to. I still think about him, about the way he looked at me, about the way he sat there that night, eyes wide open, not blinking, like he was waiting for something, like he knew something I didn't. That trip changed the way I hike. I still go out, still backpack, still love the woods, but I don't hike alone anymore. Not after that. I don't usually go into the woods alone, especially not at night. But that evening, I felt like I needed space to breathe. The week had been long. Work piling up, noise from neighbors, constant phone calls, the usual pressure. I wanted silence, no one around, nothing but nature and stillness. So after dinner, I packed up my small hiking pack, filled my water bottle, put on my boots, and drove out to the state forest about an hour from where I lived. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't think I needed to. It was just past 8:30 p.m. when I parked my car at the small gravel pull-off near the trailhead. The sun was already down, but it was early summer and the sky still held a little color. I had a flashlight and my headlamp, and I knew the area. I had hiked the loop trail a dozen times before, usually in the morning, but I figured I'd just walk a short distance into the woods, sit on a rock or a fallen log, and let my thoughts settle. As soon as I stepped off the gravel and onto the trail, everything felt different. Not bad, just different. The trees were tall and dark, the sky barely visible between them, and the sounds of insects and night birds were steady in the background. I didn't feel scared, not then. I just felt like I had to stay alert. I wasn't expecting to see anyone else out there. Most people don't go hiking at night, especially alone, but I kept my headlamp on low and walked slowly, not wanting to miss my footing on the uneven path. About 15 minutes in, I reached a spot I remembered, a big flat rock that stuck out from the side of a shallow ridge. It looked out over a patch of lower woods, dense and tangled with brush and saplings. I sat down, turned off my light, and just listened. It was peaceful for a while. The temperature was dropping slowly, and the smells of moss and damp earth filled the air. A few times I heard rustling, probably raccoons or possums, but nothing close. The wind moved the branches above me in slow waves. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe 30 minutes, maybe longer. Time felt still. Then I heard something that didn't fit. It was footsteps. Not animals, these were too heavy, too regular. Crunch, pause, crunch again. Someone walking. They were coming from my left, moving slowly through the underbrush below the ridge. I held my breath and stayed still. There was no reason anyone else should be out there. No other trail nearby, no campsite, no houses. Just woods and more woods. I turned on my headlamp and pointed it in the direction of the sound, but the light only hit trees. The footsteps had stopped. I waited, listening hard. Nothing, just the insects again. After a few minutes, I turned the light off. Maybe it was a deer or a bear shifting its weight. Maybe I'd imagined the rhythm. I told myself not to jump at shadows. I tried to relax again. Then I heard a snap, like a stick breaking, louder than before. It was closer, maybe 20 feet downslope. I stood up and scanned the area again with my light. Still nothing. No movement. Just the thick, tangled woods staring back at me. I should have turned around then and gone back to the car. But I didn't. Instead, I called out. Just a simple "hey," loud and firm. Not angry, not afraid. Nothing answered. No movement. Silence again. That was worse than if someone had answered. I stood there a while longer, then decided I'd had enough. I wasn't comfortable anymore. I turned and started walking back toward the trail, but I didn't feel right. I kept checking behind me, flashing the light into the trees. I walked faster than I had on the way in. My ears strained for sound. For a while it was quiet. Then I heard it again. Footsteps behind me, but faster now. Not running, just steady, trying to match my pace. I stopped walking and the steps stopped too. I waited. My heart was pounding in my chest. I felt exposed, even though I was surrounded by trees. I tried to slow my breathing and kept the light pointed behind me. I started walking again, and again I heard the steps. Not loud, but close enough that I could tell they were real. I wasn't imagining it. Someone was following me, not calling out, not trying to get my attention. Just walking where I walked, keeping their distance. That's when I left the trail. I stepped off to the right and crouched behind a fallen tree. I turned off the headlamp and waited. I could still hear the footsteps, faint through the brush. Then they stopped again. I stayed crouched there, barely breathing. After maybe a minute, I heard something else. A soft rustling. Someone trying to move quietly, coming closer. Whoever it was, they weren't using a light. They knew their way around, or they didn't care about tripping over roots and rocks. I backed up slowly, trying not to make noise. I didn't want to run unless I had to. My hands were shaking. I moved through the brush, keeping low, putting distance between me and the trail. I didn't care about the scratches on my arms or the twigs snagging my shirt. I just kept moving. Eventually, I came to a dry creek bed and followed it uphill. I knew it would lead back toward the parking area, just a longer way around. I stayed in the creek bed, using the pale starlight to guide me when I could, only flicking on the light now and then to avoid a fall. It felt like forever, but after what must have been close to an hour, I saw the gravel road ahead. I stayed hidden until I was sure no one else was around, then made a break for it, walking straight to my car. I didn't hear anything behind me. No more steps, no voices, just the sound of my own boots on the gravel and my breathing. When I reached the car, I unlocked it, climbed in, and locked the doors immediately. I sat there for a moment before starting the engine. My hands were slick with sweat. I kept the headlights off and just sat, listening. Nothing. The forest looked quiet again, like it always did, like it was just trees and rocks and dirt. I turned the car on and drove back down the road, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. I didn't see anyone. No one followed me. The highway was empty. By the time I got home, the sun was just starting to rise. I never told anyone about that night. What would I say? That someone followed me in the woods? That they didn't speak, didn't try to take anything, didn't even show themselves fully? Felt too strange to explain. But I never went hiking alone again, especially not at night. I don't care how familiar the trail is. I don't care how quiet my mind needs to be. That night taught me something I can't forget. Not everything in the woods wants to be seen, and not everything out there is just passing through. Some things wait, some things follow, and you'll never know why.